Hi, I'm Dr. Ohenia Gold, and this is Science on the Street. As you probably know, movies often include scenes that involve scientific concepts or technology. But have you ever wondered how those scenes are created? How do filmmakers make sure that what they're depicting is accurate and believable? That's where scientific consultants come in. Scientific consultants are experts in various fields of science who work with filmmakers to provide insight and ensure the scientific content of a movie is accurate. They can help with everything from designing futuristic technology to depicting complex scientific phenomena. But scientific consulting is about more than just getting the facts right. It's also about creating the appearance of truth in a film. In other words, scientific consultants help filmmakers make their movies feel real, even if they're set in a fictional world. Some examples of scientific consulting in films include the use of astrophysicists, notably 2017 Nobel laureate Dr. Kip Thorne, to help create the black hole in Interstellar. This process of understanding how light from a distant source would behave around a black hole and reach an observer took thousands of emails back and forth between the chief scientist at the visual effects studio and Dr. Thorne, all to get this believable image of a black hole in 2014, 5 years before NASA was able to image a real one. Another example is the use of paleontologists like Dr. Steve Brusati consulting for Jurassic World. Clearly, filmmakers can embellish some details to create a more enticing plot, but the basics are informed by real science. But scientific consulting isn't just limited to science fiction films. It can also be found in animated films, historical dramas, biopics, and even comedies. For instance, the movie Hidden Figures, about the African American women who worked at NASA during the space race, used consultants to ensure the portrayal of the science and technology was accurate. The process of scientific consulting can vary depending on the project. In some cases, consultants may be brought on board early in the development of a film to help with the scripting and design. In other cases, they may be consulted during production to help with specific scenes or effects. Such was the case with Avatar, where botanist Dr. Jody Holt assisted with how botanists work in the field and plant communication, and later with naming the plants and animals in the fictional world. Regardless of when they're involved, scientific consultants play a crucial role in making sure that the science in a film is accurate and believable. They provide valuable insights and expertise that can help bring a script to life and create a sense of realism in a movie. But scientific consulting isn't just about making sure that the science in a film is accurate. It's also about storytelling. Consultants can help filmmakers find creative ways to incorporate scientific concepts into their stories and make sure that the science enhances the narrative rather than detracting from it. For instance, the movie WALL-E used scientific consultants to help show the realistic effects of space travel on the human body. The consultants also helped filmmakers find ways to incorporate the science into the story, such as showing those travelers attempting to walk when they returned to Earth, which was based on astronauts' own real difficulties with returning to gravity. Overall, scientific consulting plays a crucial role in making movies feel realistic and believable. It helps filmmakers create a sense of authenticity and ensures that the scientific content of a film is accurate and engaging. This puts STEM fields in a light that has and will continue to influence the public's perspective on the subject matter and encourage new generations of individuals to become scientists. So next time you watch a movie with impressive special effects or complex scientific concepts, remember the role of scientific consultants who helped bring it to life. For more on this, we spoke with Dr. Stuart Sumida and Dr. Elizabeth Rega, who are both scientists and who consult for films. We're sitting down with Dr. Elizabeth Rega, medical school professor at Western University of Health Sciences, and Dr. Stuart Sumida, biology professor at California State University, San Bernardino, about scientific consulting in films. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Let's start out with sort of a straightforward question. Can you tell us how you became scientific consultants? And Elizabeth, we'll start with you.
Oh, well, goodness. I mean, how we became scientific consultants. I think this goes back to a significant friend and colleague of Stuart's and mine, Charles Solomon, who was with Stuart at UCLA. And my recollection is that the Disney studios really needed some help with their horses on Beauty and the Beast, which is Stuart's project. His first project with the studios, and the antecedent to that was Charles Solomon suggested, well, no one's left in the studios. All of the, what they called the 9 old men were gone. And so Charles had suggested, why not get an anatomist? Why not get a scientist? And they brought Stuart in, who was wildly successful on helping with a big draft horse. And then close on the heels came Lion King. And I believe, Stuart, this is where your story kind of hooks into how I got in.
That's right. The original project was, we thought, a one-off until Beauty and the Beast did so well. And then they said, well, you know, the next film's going to have all animals in it. But the film that had all animals in that, Lion King, included a primate, which was, at the time, a knuckle-walking baboon. And we're like, time out. And at that point, Elizabeth came in and helped James Baxter, who is a tremendous animator. He sort out the behavior and posture and a variety of other features of the character that became known as Rafiki. And so we actually got to work on that together, which was a lot of fun. And then after that came Pocahontas, in which Beth spent an enormous amount of time talking about both anatomical and cultural features. And I got to spend a little bit of time on some of the animals. But then over the years, we were perceived as a sort of a part of the recipe to help make characters look better and move more smoothly and more realistically. It would probably be fair to say that I mostly work on animals and occasionally dip my toe into talking about people, whereas Beth does an enormous amount of time on people and primates, including fossil people, but still does work on animals. In fact, she teaches comparative anatomy as well as human anatomy.
So at what point do you get called in? Do you called in during the planning phases of these films, or do the filmmakers get to the certain point where they're trying to create a character and then sort of panic a little bit and call in you guys as experts?
Well, as academics, I believe the answer is E, all of the above, depending on the project.
Fair.
We can tell you that it is best if they have us in early. It really is. There are some times when they simply want someone to come in and tell them, yeah, that looks great. And they hope that we say that. And it's not always the case. But in general, the best time to be in is early in the planning stages where we're doing character design and we're training the artists for how to make them move and how to get them to act on screen.
Yeah, artist education is one of the best places to make sure that they're starting on a good basis. But it really depends on where we're going. We're not the science police. And that is one of the reasons why we're popular with the studios is I've been in a film project that had a very prominent famous actor in it where, technically we had to put reference points on him physically and film him in the kind of pre-performance capture days. Right. And then create a gorilla that was retrofitted from a human rig, which was a delightful science experiment because it was so easy to do in a day, and then have to take this beautiful rig and make it worse because it didn't match the gorilla costume that they'd already filmed. Right. And if that's the kind of business that makes you a crazy person, then you're not right for the film industry, because you've got to take folks where they're at. And one of the really great things about working with animators as behind the scenes people is telling them the way it really is usually makes their life easier, not harder. Right. There's that anecdote that we have from even Mulan, which I think for both of us is just a highlight of our career, where, looking at the computer rigs of the ponies as they're galloping down in the snow, and they couldn't make them look right. And they were trying to achieve something that hadn't been done. And right when they open the rig, you're looking over their shoulder and going, oh, well, attach the pelvis and detach the scapula. And they thought it was magic, right? All of a sudden, all of their problems were solved by simply making the rig reflect the biological reality, which is kind of that perfect moment. that you have as a scientist when you're working with media. What do you think, Stuart?
Yeah, well, and Beth brings up a couple of important points. When people think of animation, they think of what they see on the outer surface of a character. And back in when we first started doing this kind of thing, that's really what you did. You talked to people who drew things, and you told them what they should look like on a piece of paper. The pipeline is much more complicated now. Everybody thinks that computer animation makes things faster and easier. It doesn't. It just gives you more options. And there are many, many more stages to this, which includes modeling, design, then what Beth just mentioned, rigging, which is putting an internal, essentially marionette-like skeleton inside of the character so the animators can move it. And that really, for us as paleontologists, is priceless, because the best analog for an internal skeleton is a skeleton, right? And so we used to spend tons of time doing surface anatomy, and we still do. But now we spend an enormous amount of time on joint biomechanics, which is great. And so what happens then is it lets you look inside of characters into their, for want of a better term, their animation anatomy, and help them get things to move in a way that hopefully will feel comfortable on screen. But that really reflects the fact that we're scientists first, we're anatomists first. And because we are into skeletons, we're into bones and joint mechanics, and then of course the way the muscles make them move, that puts us in a very, very good position to help the animators do what they want to do. But to be fair, as Beth said, we know we're not making documentaries. We know mice don't really talk. We get that.
Yeah. But if they did talk, how would their little facial muscles make their mouth move? Because that's part of overcoming. A lot of folks talk about the uncanny valley. And honestly, that discourse was so overblown because the uncanny valley is just code for I don't know how to animate eye movement. Right. And one of the things we found that goes right to our own neurobiology as primates is that we are intensely visual, and our visual cortex is so much of a part of our emotional state and social hierarchy that the studios know and leverage that without having that terminology to affix to it. In our business, it's like, okay, how do we advocate for making things look good, making things look plausible, whether it's a hyper realistic situation or whether you have to make a hadrosaur talk, right? And in which case, and it's one of our favorite anecdotes from Dinosaur, which was Disney's first foray into digital animation, is that they had an animated, an accurate hadrosaur, and the people working on that project were incredibly accurate illustrators, experts in the field like David Krentz. And, when they tested it, having a beak on a hadrosaur made it look like, and they quote, two clacking coconuts, right? So that would have been a realistic hadrosaur. So you go back to the drawing board and go, okay, hadrosaurs don't have front teeth, but if they did, how would they look? And they don't have muscles of facial expression. We know reptiles don't, including birds. But if they did have muscles of facial expression, where would they attach and how would they move? So, that's where you're kind of marrying art and science. If we can get past the fact that hadrosaurs had to talk, right? And then that's just one of the conceits or constraints. And so this is where I caution, both folks that are making their living in the attention economy, is that it may be fun kind of as a one-off to make fun of the inaccuracies in the films. But that kind of makes you come off as Grandpa Simpson, kind of shaking your fist at those kids on your lawn. I think the alternative that I hope has kept both Stuart and I relevant is that it's always a dialogue and a discourse, and it is kind of that essay into the possibilities, which really led us into Strange World, which was the perfect point for us to start a project, wasn't it? Because
it really was. It was at the front end, when ideas were being batted around, And so to circle all the way back to your question, it is really useful for us to be there at the very, very front end of things. And I can say that with some minor exceptions, most of the projects where we've actually had, I think, the most useful impact have been those where we've been on the project early on.
Yeah, like right at the very beginning, teaching Disney animators how to knuckle walk in the studio right down there in Burbank. I mean, that was, great. And really some of our lasting value, I think, that has stuck with the industry almost the most is the work we put on Mulan. Particularly from my end of things, with their central question of how do you make a woman dressed as a man read as both in a film where it's not about a princess, her mom is alive, her grandmother is alive, she's defending family honor in a real crisis. This was a departure for the studio, not only in terms of theme and gender, but an enormous step for them in trying to depict accurately people of different population subgroups. And this is, what does a Chinese skull like? What does it mean to be Chinese? And we had a lot of, we had a lot of undoing within the studios with the artists as our advocates to make this work, because the producers had a vision that, in a way we were like, that's like putting, Asian eyes on a Barbie doll head. You're not being complete about it. And the fact of the matter is that there are significant differences in skull shape that affect face shape, that affect facial expression. And unless we got them to recognize and make those skulls not European, it wasn't going to succeed as a film. And there are many other aspects where maybe that consistency didn't succeed. And I'm thinking of the costumes here. So for anyone out there that's like concerned about the costumes, I echo their concerns about those. But when it comes to the physiognomy, it was revolutionary. And we worked with Ruben Aquino, an amazing animator who had done so many things. Shang on this one, I believe, and then Powhatan on Pocahontas. And he is a Filipino American, and as a Filipino,
part Okinawan as well.
Yeah, and was partly our advocate, and we felt just like getting Rafiki not to knuckle walk. Getting Mulan and Shang to have accurate shaped heads and faces changed the way the studio engaged that variation that a lot of people call race, but really we know as scientists is just, your population subgroup, contingent on how people perceive that. And before then, the studio had been trying hard. They tried hard at Pocahontas to less success, I think, in everybody's view, but it was part of that inflection point, I think, really in the studios. They talk about the golden age, and for us, that was the golden age of really educating their animators and educating their producers. And now you see the diversity of characters that they animate, and they don't have to go to their go-to diversity people. That's already baked in.
Yeah,
and it brings us back to Strange World.
Part of making sure that these subgroups are accurately portrayed is what ultimately will make the film more believable and more engaging. So it's a really important aspect to sort of get right.
It is, and the good news is that studios are recognizing this. It's not just Disney, but a variety of studios are recognizing this as well. There's a very much an analogous example in video games. The original designs of the characters in the video game Horizon Zero Dawn pretty much looked like Barbie dolls, and even though we spent a lot of time talking about dinosaurs and making robotic analogs for dinosaurs and things like that, the amount of time that they were convinced to spend looking at proper female versus male anatomy really made the heroine in that game one of the most popular ones we now have. I would argue that the video game industry is also beginning to learn some of those lessons a little later than the film industry. But the great news is that media understands that if you represent people in a way that others can relate to, it's going to work, and people are going to engage when they see themselves on screen.
Representation matters is the ultimate
Yes, absolutely.
lesson. Yeah.
And if you look at the dates of those films, when you look back at the heyday, and that's early 90s, I do feel with some pride now looking back on the career and what Stuart and I have both been able to do with Disney, but also with other studios. The fact that this is not something that you have to spend a half an hour introducing variation and representation and why it matters, everyone knows that now. And when everyone knows it, I feel like you've succeeded as somebody that was an early torchbearer for getting the studios to be accurate to the degree to which was going to assist in representation and to really look at the world around them. And nobody is a better ally for that than artists, because you guide them and they help be our allies. And I think that's how we succeeded within the industry, is regarding the artists as our allies and understanding what their audience was, and not policing their science outside the scope of the project.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining me today, and we'll see you next time on Science on the Street.